What happens when one of Hollywood's most charismatic and quick-witted actors steps onto daytime television's most unpredictable stage and everything spirals completely out of control? You're about to witness one of the most explosive celebrity confrontations ever captured on live television. Subscribe and let me know in the comments which side you're on. The morning started with genuine excitement at the View Studios. Robert Downey Jr., Hollywood's most remarkable comeback story, was scheduled to appear for what should have been a celebratory interview about his viral Ironheart support and his return to Marvel as Doctor Doom. Robert walked onto the set with that signature swagger, still glowing from his Iron Man Loves Ironheart video that had melted hearts across social media. His custom Pinewood Studios Doom hat had become an instant meme. His eyes held that familiar glint of mischief and intelligence that had charmed audiences for decades. Whoopi Goldberg handled the initial introduction with her usual warmth, and the audience erupted in thunderous applause. Robert settled into his seat with relaxed confidence, that quick smile already working its magic on everyone in the studio. Sarah Haynes kicked off the conversation with genuine enthusiasm about his recent Oscar win and his bold move to Broadway. Robert, we just saw your beautiful support for Dominique Thorne and the Ironheart series, Sarah began, her voice bright with admiration. That 14-minute conversation you had with her was so genuine. How does it feel to be passing the Iron Man torch? Robert's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. You know, Sarah, it's incredibly fulfilling. Dominic is doing something special with Riri Williams. She's bringing this brilliant, resourceful young inventor to life in a way that honors what came before while blazing her own trail. When I called her after she wrapped filming in Chicago, I meant every word. She's not embarrassing Iron Man, she's elevating the whole legacy.
Sunny Hostin leaned in with interest. And you're currently filming as Doctor Doom at Pinewood Studios. That custom hat you wore in the Ironheart video was genius, with Doom hidden in the Pinewood logo. How does it feel to go from Iron Man to one of Marvel's greatest villains? The transition is fascinating, Robert replied, his voice warming with passion. Doom is intellectually Tony's equal, but morally his opposite. It's like exploring the dark mirror of everything Tony Stark could have become. Plus, working with the Russo brothers again and diving into this character's complex psychology, it's exactly the kind of challenge I love. The conversation flowed naturally for several minutes, with Robert sharing behind-the-scenes stories about filming at Pinewood Studios and his genuine excitement about Dominique Thorne's performance in Ironheart. He talked about how he'd spent 14 minutes geeking out with her about the show's first 3 episodes, discussing her process, specific scenes, and character choices. The audience was clearly captivated by his enthusiasm and authentic mentorship of the next generation of Marvel heroes. But throughout this friendly exchange, one host had remained notably silent. Joy Behar sat with her arms folded, watching with that calculating expression that regular viewers knew spelled trouble. Her eyes had a particular gleam, the kind that suggested she was less interested in celebrating Robert's achievements and more focused on finding some angle to exploit. She'd been unusually quiet for nearly 10 minutes, which for Joy was practically a record.
Finally, Joy leaned forward. The room temperature dropped. "Well," Joy said, with that edge of false concern, "this is all very heartwarming, but I think we need to address the elephant in the room, Robert. Your return to Marvel as Doctor Doom after winning an Oscar. Isn't this just a desperate cash grab that undermines all your serious acting credibility?" The studio fell silent except for the hum of the cameras. Robert's expression didn't change, but anyone who'd followed his career closely would recognize the subtle shift, the way his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the way his hands stilled on the armrests of his chair. This was a man who'd survived addiction, career disasters, public humiliation, and emerged stronger each time. He knew when he was being set up. "I'm sorry, Joy," Robert said, his voice still pleasant, but with an underlying steel. What elephant would that be? I thought we were having a conversation about my work. Joy's smile was sharp and predatory. Come on, Robert. Everyone's saying you're going backwards. You finally get taken seriously with Oppenheimer, and then you put on another costume? Some critics are calling it a betrayal of everything you accomplished as a dramatic actor. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The other hosts shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the warm promotional interview they'd planned. Robert sat back slightly, his expression unchanged, but those who knew him could see the storm building behind his eyes. Interesting perspective, Joy, Robert replied, his voice measured but gaining an edge. I'm curious, Joy, who exactly are these critics you're quoting? Because most of the actual coverage I've seen has been about the creative possibilities of the role and the excitement of working with the Russo brothers again. Joy leaned forward, clearly energized by his response. Well, let's be honest here. You spent years trying to distance yourself from Tony Stark, building this serious acting credibility with Oppenheimer and The Sympathizer, and now you're putting on another superhero costume? Doesn't that seem like a step backwards to you? Robert's smile became more forced, but his voice remained controlled. Joy, I think you're misunderstanding both my career choices and my motivations. Playing Doctor Doom isn't going backwards. It's exploring a completely different character in a universe I helped build. The fact that I can move between Christopher Nolan films, HBO limited series, Broadway productions, and Marvel movies shows range, not regression. But let's talk about this Ironheart promotion. That whole Iron Man loves Ironheart video felt pretty staged. Are you using your movie star charm to prop up a show that might not be strong enough to stand on its own? The question was clearly designed to wound, and Robert's composure flickered for just a moment. His jaw tightened visibly, and when he spoke, his voice carried a warning edge that anyone familiar with his films would recognize.
That's an interesting way to phrase a question about theater criticism, Robert said slowly. I spent months preparing for this role, working with dialect coaches, movement specialists, and diving deep into Ayad's complex text. If you've actually seen the production, I'd be happy to discuss the specific choices I made as an actor. Have you seen it, Joy? Joy's face flushed slightly. I don't need to see every single project to understand when someone's trading on their celebrity rather than their talent. Ah, Robert nodded, his voice now dangerously quiet. So you're criticizing a performance you haven't actually witnessed. That's illuminating. Whoopi tried to jump in. Maybe we should— No, Joy interrupted, her voice rising. This is exactly the problem, Robert. You think your charm and your comeback story make you untouchable, but some of us remember the Robert Downey Jr. who was unreliable, who cost productions millions of dollars, who— Stop. Robert's voice cut through the air like a blade. The single word carried such authority that even Joy fell silent. Let me make something very clear, Joy. If you want to discuss my work, my choices, my performances, I'm all ears. But if you think you're going to dredge up my past struggles to score cheap points on daytime television, you've seriously misjudged who you're dealing with. The tension in the studio was now palpable. The audience sat in stunned silence, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Joy, however, seemed to misunderstand Robert's controlled response for weakness and decided to press her advantage. I'm just asking the questions our viewers want answered, she said, her voice taking on that faux innocent tone she used when preparing to deliver a particularly vicious blow. Your past behavior is relevant when we're talking about your current career choices. Robert leaned forward slowly, his eyes never leaving Joy's face. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried the kind of quiet menace that had made him so effective in dramatic roles. My past behavior, Joy, is a matter of public record.
I've been open about my struggles, my mistakes, and my recovery. What I won't tolerate is someone using those struggles as ammunition in what was supposed to be a professional interview. You want to talk about relevance? Let's talk about the relevance of treating guests with basic respect.
Joy, realizing she'd touched a nerve but interpreting Robert's measured response as vulnerability rather than strength, decided to escalate. Look, I'm not trying to attack you personally, but when you take on roles like Dr. Doom, it raises questions about your artistic integrity. Are you choosing roles based on artistic merit or just following the money? Robert's laugh was short and sharp. Artistic integrity? Joy, you're sitting on a show that manufactures controversy for ratings, questioning my artistic integrity? The irony is almost overwhelming. We're journalists here, Joy snapped back. We ask tough questions. Journalists? Robert's eyebrows shot up. Is that what you call ambushing guests with unresearched criticism and personal attacks? Because in my experience, real journalists do their homework before making accusations. Sonny tried to mediate. I think what Joy is trying to say— I know exactly what Joy is trying to say, Robert interrupted, his voice still controlled but with growing intensity. She's trying to create a moment, manufacture drama where none exists. The question is why she thinks that's more valuable than actually discussing the work I'm here to promote. Joy's face was beginning to flush red, but instead of backing down, she doubled down with the reckless abandon that had made her infamous. You know what, Robert? I think the real issue is that you can't handle being questioned by a strong woman. You're used to fawning interviews where everyone worships at the altar of your comeback story. The words hit the studio like a physical blow. Robert sat perfectly still for a moment, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried the kind of controlled fury that made everyone in the room hold their breath. A strong woman? Robert repeated slowly. Joy, I've worked with some of the strongest women in the industry. Jodie Foster, Gwyneth Paltrow, Scarlett Johansson, Susan Downey. Strong women don't need to tear people down to feel powerful. They build things, create things, inspire things. What you're doing isn't strength, it's insecurity masquerading as journalism. Joy's mouth fell open, clearly not expecting such a direct and articulate response. How dare you psychoanalyze me? I've been doing this for decades. And what exactly have you been doing for decades? Robert asked, his voice still dangerously calm. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've spent decades perfecting the art of attack disguised as inquiry. That's not journalism, Joy. That's performance art, and not very good performance art at that. Sarah tried desperately to intervene. Maybe we should take a different approach. No, Joy cut her off sharply. Robert needs to answer for his hypocrisy. He talks about artistic integrity while cashing Marvel checks. He preaches about recovery while promoting violence in his films. Robert's eyes flashed with genuine anger for the first time. Violence in my films? Joy, have you actually watched any of my work? Or are you just reciting talking points someone wrote for you? Because if you'd bothered to examine my filmography, you'd know that some of my most powerful roles have been about the cost of violence, about broken men finding redemption.
Joy, realizing she was losing ground, decided to go for what she thought would be the killing blow. Let's be honest about your career trajectory, Robert. After Endgame, you've been struggling to find your place. Doolittle was a disaster, and now you're desperately trying to recapture relevance with Oscar campaigns and Marvel returns. The accusation was so fundamentally wrong that Robert actually laughed, a genuine laugh that somehow made his growing anger even more intimidating. Struggling to find my place? He repeated incredulously. Joy, in the last 2 years, I've won an Academy Award, earned an Emmy nomination, made my Broadway debut, and been cast as one of Marvel's most iconic villains. If that's struggling, I'd hate to see what you consider success. But you're not the cultural force you used to be, Joy pressed, her voice getting shriller. Iron Man was lightning in a bottle, and you've been chasing that high ever since. Robert stood up slowly, his full height and presence commanding the entire studio. The movement was deliberate, powerful, and absolutely magnetic. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who'd earned his place through decades of actual work. Cultural force?
Robert's voice was building now, but still controlled. Joy, I helped build a cinematic universe that changed the entire film industry. I've influenced a generation of actors and filmmakers. I've used my platform to talk about mental health, addiction recovery, and environmental issues. What cultural force have you built besides divisiveness? Joy, now visibly flustered and clearly losing the battle, made the fatal mistake of getting personal. Well, since we're talking about influence, let's discuss your marriage to Susan. Some people say you've only stayed clean because she manages every aspect of your life. Is that really recovery, or is it just elaborate babysitting?
The studio fell into dead silence. Robert's face went completely white, then flushed with the rage so controlled it was terrifying. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, and for a moment, everyone in the studio thought they might witness something truly explosive. When Robert finally spoke, his voice was so quiet that everyone had to strain to hear him, but every word carried the weight of absolute fury. Susan Downey is the most brilliant, strong, and accomplished woman I know. She's a producer who's built an empire, a mother who's raised amazing children, and a partner who chose to stand by me when I was rebuilding my life. The fact that you would use our marriage as a cheap attack shows exactly who you are, Joy. I'm just asking legitimate questions, Joy started. Legitimate? Robert's voice cracked like a whip. There's nothing legitimate about attacking someone's family to score points on television. That's not journalism. That's not entertainment. That's just cruelty with cameras. Joy, realizing she'd crossed a line but too committed to her attack to retreat, decided to go all in with her most vicious assault yet. Look, Robert, maybe it's time to face facts. You had your moment with Iron Man, you got your Oscar, but you're fundamentally an aging actor trying to stay relevant in an industry that's moved past you. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Robert stared at Joy for a long moment, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and something approaching pity. When he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. Aging actor trying to stay relevant, Robert repeated slowly. Joy, I'm 59 years old, and I just had one of the biggest years of my career. I won an Oscar for a performance that critics called one of the best of my career. I successfully transitioned to Broadway in a critically demanding role. I'm about to play one of Marvel's most complex villains. If that's irrelevance, what would you call what you're doing here? Joy's face was now completely red, a combination of embarrassment and rage. What I'm doing is holding you accountable for your arrogance. Accountable for what? Robert shot back. For succeeding? For overcoming addiction? For building a career that spanned multiple decades in genres? Or are you just angry that I won't play the victim for your entertainment?
Joy, realizing that every attack had backfired and that she was being systematically dismantled by someone far more intelligent and articulate than she'd anticipated, made the ultimate mistake. In her desperation to land a blow, she committed the one unforgivable sin that would seal her fate. You know what your real problem is, Robert, Joy said, her voice now shaking with a mixture of rage and humiliation. You think you're better than everyone else because you conquered your drug addiction. But some of us remember the real you, the unreliable, narcissistic addict who thought the world owed him something. The silence that followed was deafening. Robert stared at Joy with an expression of such controlled fury that several people in the studio actually took a step back. His hands were trembling slightly, not with fear or nervousness, but with the effort of containing a rage so powerful it seemed to fill the entire room. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet it was barely audible, but it carried more menace than any shout could have managed. "The real me?" Robert repeated, his voice like ice. "You want to talk about the real me, Joy?" The real me survived addiction, rebuilt my career from nothing, and learned to be grateful for every opportunity.
The real me has spent years using my platform to help others struggling with similar issues. The real me takes responsibility for his mistakes and works every day to be better." He paused, his eyes never leaving Joy's face. "What about the real you, Joy?" "The real you seems to be someone who uses other people's pain as entertainment, someone who thinks cruelty is clever and destruction is journalism. The real you is sitting there trying to hurt someone for no reason other than your own twisted pleasure." Joy tried to interrupt, but Robert wasn't finished. He was building to something, and everyone in the studio could feel it.
"You want to bring up my addiction?" Robert's voice was rising now, but with control rather than chaos. "Let's talk about addiction, Joy. I was addicted to drugs. What are you addicted to? Because from where I'm sitting, you seem addicted to causing pain, addicted to tearing people down, addicted to the sick rush you get from humiliating others." The other hosts were frozen in their chairs, too stunned to intervene. This had gone so far beyond anything they'd ever experienced on the show. "At least my addiction only hurt me," Robert continued, his voice now thunderous. "Your addiction hurts everyone who has the misfortune to be your target. And the worst part, you do it sober. You do it with full awareness of the pain you're causing. What does that say about who you really are?" Joy's face was now completely white, except for two bright red spots on her cheeks. She was shaking with rage, but for the first time in the interview, she seemed unable to find words. "How dare you? How dare you come on my show and attack me like this?" Robert's smile was cold and sharp. "Your show? Joy, this isn't a show. This is a public execution disguised as entertainment. And the only person being executed here is your credibility."
Robert began removing his microphone with deliberate, controlled movements. Each action was precise and final, making it clear that he was done participating in whatever Joy thought she was doing. "Don't you dare walk away from me," Joy shouted, her voice now completely unhinged. "Don't you dare turn your back on me when I'm talking to you." Robert paused in removing his microphone and looked at Joy with an expression of profound sadness. "Joy, I'm not walking away from you. I'm walking away from toxicity. I'm walking away from manufactured outrage. I'm walking away from the kind of television that makes the world an uglier place." He finished removing the microphone and placed it carefully on his chair. "You asked about the real me earlier," Robert said, turning to address the camera directly. "The real me believes in treating people with dignity, even when they don't deserve it. The real me believes in building things rather than tearing them down. The real me knows that strength comes from lifting others up, not pushing them down." Joy was practically screaming now. "You can't just make a speech and walk away. You owe these viewers an explanation." Robert turned back to her one final time, his expression calm but resolute. "I owe your viewers entertainment, Joy. That's why they tune in. What you've given them today is a masterclass in how not to conduct an interview. You've shown them what happens when ambition overrides humanity, when the desire for a viral moment trumps basic decency." He gestured toward the other hosts, who sat in stunned silence. "I came here to talk about my work, my Broadway debut, my return to Marvel. Instead, I've had to defend my marriage, my recovery, and my career choices against someone who clearly hasn't done the basic research required for a professional interview." Robert moved toward the edge of the set, but turned back one final time. "To anyone watching this who might be struggling with addiction, with career setbacks, with rebuilding their life, don't let people like Joy convince you that your past defines your future. Don't let anyone use your struggles as ammunition against you. And never, ever let someone else's insecurity make you feel small." He looked directly at Joy one last time. "Joy, I hope someday you'll understand that real strength doesn't come from tearing others down. It comes from building them up. Real power doesn't come from causing pain. It comes from healing it. And real journalism doesn't come from manufacturing controversy. It comes from seeking truth." With that, Robert Downey Jr. walked off the set with the same confident stride he'd entered with, leaving behind a stunned studio audience, a group of shell-shocked hosts, and one of the most explosive celebrity confrontations in television history. Joy stood in the middle of the set, pointing at empty air, her face a mask of rage and humiliation.
The cameras kept rolling as she finally turned back to her co-hosts, all of whom were staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to disappointment. "Well," Whoopi finally said quietly, "I think we definitely need that commercial break now."
And that's how Robert Downey Jr. turned a routine promotional appearance into a masterclass in dignity under fire. Instead of being the victim Joy thought she was creating, Robert showed the world what real strength looks like, someone who refuses to be diminished by someone else's insecurity. What did you think of this confrontation? Did Joy get what she deserved, or did Robert go too far? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable celebrity moments that show you what really happens when the cameras are rolling.